Olá a todos, bem-vindos a mais um episódio da Prova de Contacto. Eu sou o João Paulo, estou aqui com os meus colegas o Ruben e o João. Olá, malta.
Olá.
O João hoje está sem mic, está ali no... aqui a tratar das duas coisas.
Volta ao volante.
É verdade. Hoje temos aqui um episódio também muito especial. Temos aqui mais um convidado internacional, que o Ruben vai passar aqui a...
Depois do Márcio.
Sim, que também foi uma excelente conversa.
Temos o Nicholas Pinto,
que vamos fazer aqui uma pequena introdução.
Que está cá no Porto para apresentar o seu projeto Alma The Spirit Sense e para dar uma Masterclass que decorreu durante este fim de semana de 16 e 17, se não estou enganado.
Sim, sou mais esquecido datas.
O Nicholas é um fotógrafo italo-americano, radicado em Chicago, Illinois. Como um fotógrafo documental e de rua, o seu trabalho explora visualmente situações relacionadas com a consciência cultural e social, a pobreza e os problemas de saúde. Como narrador, Nicholas resiste a esses momentos e desenvolve projetos capazes de dar visibilidade a situações de vida difíceis que normalmente nos passam despercebidas. E eu acho que, como é óbvio, vamos agora transitar para inglês.
Sim.
Que é para introduzirmos o nosso convidado.
Exatamente.
So,
por isso...
Hi.
Hello,
Nicholas.
welcome, Nicholas.
Hola.
Thank you for coming and talking with us. And
Thank you for having me.
we hope you are enjoying our city as much as we love it.
Yeah, Porto is amazing. There's no shortage of pictures on these streets and no shortage of subjects, and that's a really
Have you had any time to go
I've
out alone?
Yeah, I try to make the time in the morning before people start moving around, and I've had a few mornings, so I haven't had a chance to look at the photos yet, but usually that's kind of after I'm done with the place that I kind of check it out. I don't like to look too soon.
Okay, so you're one of those photographers that likes to let him sit for a while and just...
Yeah, without shooting film, not letting it sit that long, but enough to let me finish what I'm doing and then look at it. Yeah.
So let's start with what brought you here to Portugal. We are the exhibition and the masterclass. Probably you start with the exhibition, the project that you're developing in Cuba, right?
Sounds good.
Perhaps you can talk to us a bit about how this project started and what drove you to go to Cuba and start photographing there.
All right. Well, I started teaching with Leica Akademie in North America, and I did that after doing some workshops and learning how to put myself and my work in front of people, which I think is an important thing to learn how to do. It took me a while to do that, and once I started doing that, then I was able to show the right people my work, which kind of opened some doors for me. Those situations, like anytime you open a door, another couple doors open, and from there I met a couple students from the academies, people that were interested in Cuba. It was always a place that I was interested in going. This is right after it was open to the U.S. citizens, and it just kind of I found myself down there. I really didn't know what I was going there particularly for, besides the fact that I started shooting a project of fishermen in Miami, and a lot of the fishermen in Miami are Cuban. So based on that, I wanted to explore the Cuban fishermen that were from Cuba, obviously the original source of the fishermen that found their way in Miami. And from that point on, the projects changed and the subjects changed based on just what happens when you hit the ground. I think any person that's worked on a project or any artist knows, is when you give the project a little bit of room to tell you what it is, that's kind of when it starts to form its own body, and you have to just kind of have the intuition to follow that.
Yeah, let the feeling work, right?
Let the work kind of guide you.
Flow.
Exactly. I think a lot of mistakes happen sometimes everybody, I think, is, at least for me, I know that this happened to me in the past, where you have an idea and you have this like concept and you want to stick to it no matter what. And, sometimes that can constrain you. And when you let it go and you let it move forward. So Alma, the project that we have here in Portugal right now in Porto, is a project that honestly just kind of came up from nothing, to be honest. I was supposed to shoot fishermen. The project kind of got derailed when my translator's car broke down. And I started shooting in the streets as I normally do. And like I taught in the Masterclass here on Monday and Tuesday, The camera acts as a passport where you open doors, where you meet strangers. And in this particular town in Cuba, the door opened. I went into a dance class, or not a class, but a program of Cubans that were, disabled. And I immediately was overwhelmed with the emotion of seeing the beauty of people that had a hard time walking or were in wheelchairs or had disabilities, dancing and celebrating. And at that moment, my project changed. At that moment, my translator came to me about 20 minutes later. Okay, the car's ready. I said, no, we don't need the car anymore.
Everything changed just because a broken car.
Well, yeah, the broken car and the feeling that I was overwhelmed with. Like at that point, I was interested in what I was seeing, not necessarily. And that's a luxury from freelancing and from doing work that I choose to work on, rather than being on assignment. Because sometimes if you're on assignment or you're working for someone else, it's different.
Stick to the plan.
Right. So there's a positive with that because you're getting paid and someone's sending you out there. The outside of that is, the flip side is when you're on your own, you're necessarily working for yourself, but you have the freedom to decide where your photography leads you. So it's, the sacrifice that you take by doing those projects, by self-funding those things, by finding your way through photography is the benefit is that you can actually explore your own feelings and you can push and you can follow a project like that. Otherwise, you might not be able to.
After the first trip, how did you start preparing the project? Did you went and study more of the culture, or just went full feeling while you were there? Just followed your gut?
I think what I did is I learned more about Cuba, about this program, about the fact that was so surprising for a lot of people, because the idea is that you have a concept of Cuba, you have an idea about it, you have a predetermined judgment of what it would be, and to see that not only are the Cuban people, in this circumstance being taken care of, but there's programs that are important for them to actually use their bodies and go out and express themselves, and they're not just like locked in a room. And it's something that, it's thoughtful, like, because people that, have those certain disabilities, they need that. They need to be able to go out and feel the freedom to express themselves. And it really does show. They're just part of the community. Nobody's judging them. And not only that, they add to the community. They're extra. They're like the special, they're contributing. Yeah, right. And so to prepare for that project, the next step was finding out when they were going to have another recital or when the next program would be. But again, it didn't really stick to the recital, because the recital was the thing that connected me. It was the emotional connection that I had. It was that beautiful exhibit of people just expressing themselves and being alive. But the next step was, okay, well, is that really what I was photographing? Was I photographing a dance program? And I did that, and I photographed that, and I thought that was my project for a while. But then I realized that, although I do have a project of that what I was really experiencing in this place was not about dancers. It was not about only that. It was also the people, the love, the energy. And it was really important for me to not necessarily photograph the cliche Cuba and show Cubans in this cliche way where almost like I'm putting them on display. It was more about them sharing themselves with me. And what I attempted to do and what I'm attempting to do in the work is to really just show what it feels like to be around people that are fully alive, that don't have the worries that sometimes the modern world with excess does give you, and the ability to just be grateful for what you have. And if I talk to my Cuban friends there, they'll say yes, but in the U.S. you can say that because
there's always
it's always greener on the other side of the grass. But the concept is that I respect that opinion, and I think they're correct because they're living it. I'm not living in their shoes. Right. But what I see when I go there is a very special, unique, just an amazing diamond that shines, in the people and in the things. And nothing's perfect, and obviously they have their own struggles. But what they do have is what I see people where I come from in the U.S., in a major city like Chicago. Sometimes I see it lacking. I see we have everything, but we don't have
Okay.
The basic thing of like connecting with our strangers and things like that. Like I was explaining, one of the images in the project that's like the headline with the boy in the balloon,
Right.
was a recent shot from my last trip, and that was, that came from the birthday party that we threw for one of the dancers. When I got there, it turned out, we found out that he was turning 60 that week. When I left, when I went to travel, I did not know it was going to be his birthday. I just knew I had a feeling I needed to get back. Because one of the things I really dreaded...
Happy coincidence.
Yeah. One of the things I was dreading over the course of that few months of not being back was, what if something happened? What if I don't get back and something happens to one of these people that I'm photographing, and these people that are not like dear to me, and I didn't get to say the proper goodbye, or I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do with them and to share everything I wanted to share. And so I was kind of, should I go now? Should I go now? And then I decided, I'm just going to go. I booked it. I didn't know what was going to go on. I left that week. I get there on that Monday, and they tell me that, oh, he's turning 60 on Thursday. And it's like, okay, we're throwing a party. And it turned out to be his first birthday party that he's ever had in his life, in his 60 years, like where everybody came around and celebrated. And so from there, it's like I'm photographing this party, and I'm just taking pictures like you would take as a family member, taking pictures. These weren't necessarily anything special. But during this process, and all the people coming in from the town, and the kids riding their bikes up and giving cake away to the kids in the street, and all these things, and seeing him just happy, celebrating, that's when my spirit, again, just like the first time I was there, I felt fulfilled. I felt filled with this joy of life and seeing this beauty happen around me. And that's when I start taking pictures that are meaningful to me, or I'm able to. It doesn't happen often, and that's what I share with other photographers, or even with myself. Sometimes I need reminding, especially with myself, is that we're always searching for that photo. We're always searching for that moment. But the more you kind of look for it, and the more you're like digging for it, the less that it comes to you. Mm-hmm. And when you actually start living and following your intuition and contributing and being present,
it will happen.
It happens. Yeah. It's like one of those things people...
You just have to be prepared for that.
You have to be prepared. Yeah, that's the number one thing. So Alma The Spirit Sense, that's here in Portugal, came from these moments that I kept finding myself experiencing in Cuba. And then after a few years of shooting, it's just the pictures started having their own narrative. And it wasn't about documenting the town. It wasn't about an individual person. It wasn't about dancers. Right. It was just about the whole spirit of what I was feeling within that town, within the people.
It was easy to engage with those people, to start being almost like a part of the family?
Well, I think, like I explained when I teach, and what we just went over in the class on Monday and Tuesday here, is that people are genuinely very intelligent, emotionally. They may not, everybody has a different degree of education, and people come from doctorates and bachelors in high school, but overall, all people that I've met, most people, have a degree of emotional intelligence, meaning they kind of perceive what you are bringing to the table, whether that's genuine or not. So the more that you can approach people in a genuine manner, and that goes back to actually knowing why you're there or following your intuition, it's kind of like an exchange that happens. People, they can sense that you're doing something or you're there for a reason, at least on the surface. And what that does is it at least allows that initial interaction to happen. And always a smile or just some type of basic, cordial respect for another human being. I don't just walk in someone's house, just like anywhere else. Just because the door's open doesn't mean I'm going to walk in. Even in that dance program, the music was playing, the door was open, but I didn't walk in. I stood at the doorway and I was just watching, and then I was invited in. And once I'm invited in, then I feel like, okay, now I can photograph.
Yeah, you had permission to be part of it.
Right, but if I just go in there with my camera and start, it's like anything else. Have you ever had a friend that came over to your house that opened the fridge that you didn't tell them to open the fridge? You know how that feels. It's like, why are you doing that? Everybody knows you shouldn't do that.
At least ask first.
It's the same thing with the camera. It's there's plenty of food. The fridge will be open, but don't force your way.
Just be honest.
Just be. Right. Just wait. be patient, and if the pictures are meant to come at that particular time, and you're putting the right energy in, then you'll get those pictures. And if you're not, then you won't. And if you don't, maybe you shouldn't have got them there. Maybe it's not time. Maybe you need to go to the next place. I don't know. Maybe it's not your project. That's just my own.
So you have this feeling of that it's the project that finds you. No, it's not you to find the project, right?
Right. Photography has been that way.
Be open to wherever comes.
Yeah. Photography has been that way for me from the beginning. It was never something I planned on doing. It was never something I imagined doing. I got out of the military. It was the last thing that I would do, because coming into the art world was like the opposite of being in the military. And even as I would tell people, they'd say, "What are you talking about? You're gonna do what? Why? But it happened as, again.
And why not?
Exactly. Why not?
That's the main question. Why not?
Right. But I was surprised by it as well, because as I took a photography class as a blow off when I got out of the military, I was 21 years old, and I thought, I'm going to take a class that's going to be easy, that's not going to be challenging, that I can just get a grade in and get my credits and move on to the next thing, because I just, I didn't know what I was going to do at that time. Like a lot of veterans, when they get out of the military, they don't know what they're going to do, because what you do in the military doesn't necessarily prepare you for the next step in civilian life.
When you return.
Yeah, it's just like you got to figure it out. And at that time, I was figuring it out. I took a class. I sat in the class. The teacher, the first day of class, said, "If you think this is going to be easy, then I suggest you drop this class, because it's not easy."
The door is that way.
Yeah. If you don't have any money, drop this class because it's expensive. If you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, drop this class because it's going to take all your time. And at this moment, I was like, what is he talking about? You're talking about taking pictures, right? Like a camera, clicking a shutter, like, really?
Is this a real...
How hard could this be?
Yeah, right.
It is.
Yeah, exactly. And then after a few rolls of film and a few classes, I was hooked. I was literally hooked by the idea of non-verbally communicating with someone else, with the idea that what I'm feeling, what's going on within me can somehow, even in a very basic way in the beginning, obviously we know we're all pretty bad when we start, but the idea is that first connection with a classmate that said, "Hey, what is this picture about? What are you doing here?" It's like, wait a minute, I'm sparking that question in your mind, like just from a photo. I was surprised. And at that point, I was really hooked. Unfortunately, I didn't know where to go. So after that class, I went back to my studies as a psychology major, and I continued my studies in psychology. But everywhere I went, I would see pictures in my head because I was like hooked. I would drive the car. I would just see photos, the way the light would come in. It was like, that was it. Like pictures were everywhere. Anywhere I went. Yeah,
we understand.
All right, cool. Got it.
So, after college, what drew you first to street photography? What was the trigger that called you to the streets?
Well, I really didn't know that street photography existed. I knew that I had a camera and I had an assignment and I had some film to shoot. And the street is kind of where I just took the camera. And I would see these characters outside of my college. I went to college in Columbia. It's called Columbia College in Chicago. And it's right downtown in the South Loop. And at this time, this was a neighborhood that was still in the middle of changing. And there was all kinds of people. There was like blues clubs and things around. And it was really interesting. And so I would just take my camera around and photograph people in the streets, not knowing necessarily that this was something that people did. And at this time, it was still, not to say that obviously there's way more street photographers today, but at this time there was less. There was still, obviously I didn't know about it, but there were still people that I'm sure were doing it. Obviously there's a history of it now. We've had a rich history of street photography, but at the time I was doing it, I was actually really grateful that I didn't know. Because if I knew, maybe I would have had a different concept about what I was doing. So I had this like little period of freedom for like almost a year where I didn't know what I was doing or why I was doing it. It was just something that I felt drawn to do. Right. And then in one of the classes I took, they played a Cartier-Bresson video, The Decisive Moment. And, it was like a slide. It was like an old school, it was an old school slide. And it's like, it was like, you have to milk the cow quite a bit to get a little cheese. Cha-ching, cha-ching. And it's like, I was like, whoa, like this happened before. I was like, great. Like that I was connected to something, at least intuition, not photographically, especially at that moment. Like I'm making all the pictures I took at that point. I probably haven't shown any of those, right? You know,
I think that's mostly common for most of us.
Right, it's a common path, but
it's a good sign. It's good sign of evolution. We're getting better over time.
Yeah, right. But that's what brought me into street photography. Just the beginning of playing around with a camera, not knowing what I'm doing with it, making a lot of mistakes. But again, I was immediately drawn to people, connecting with people. And I think what kept me going was that process of knowing that the camera was starting to act as a way to connect with a complete stranger, or to take a photo of someone, or to tell a story. One of the first projects I did was...
I was going to ask you, what was the first project that you started experimenting more with this mixture with street and documentary style?
Yeah, it was a project called Randy. And what I did is, again, to show how projects change, I was really drawn to people sleeping in the middle of cities. Like, for some reason, like, people sleeping was just something that was interesting to me, that they were just so peaceful. People are moving along, and they're just really peaceful. At least they look peaceful. I mean, I know they have their own stories, but from the surface, it looks really comfortable.
Yeah, only on the surface.
On the surface.
Only on the surface.
Yeah, but I wanted to photograph that peacefulness of their sleep. And one of the first people I started photographing was sleeping in a park right outside of downtown near the Art Institute in Chicago. And as I was photographing him, he woke up. And this was the beginning of like the way that my style of photography, my approach. This was like, I didn't walk away. I didn't say, okay, I'm going to get out of here now. Like I move on to my project. Yeah, like the whoops. Like, no, this mistake, kind of like the car breaking down, same kind of thing, now became an opportunity to have a conversation. Right. And then from that conversation, I hello, how are you?
Know the person.
What's your name? I sat down next to him. I wasn't standing over him.
Right.
I was next to him. Maybe we shared a cigarette. I didn't smoke, but I was going to smoke at this moment because I want to be on the same place with him. Right. I want him to know that I'm with him. And not in a phony way, not in a way of acting, but in a way of, how are you? And he started opening up to me and talking to me. And I started asking questions about how he got where he's at and what's going on. And he's, you know, obviously these kind of things happen occasionally, but the difference with this one was I felt like there was a story I needed to tell. And I think, you know, with Randy, because he was also a veteran, that also really struck me because I saw myself in him. Like I saw the ability to be lost, coming out of the military, not having a path.
It could be you.
Yeah, it could, like in some future place that I wasn't, you know, that things didn't work out for me. Like I saw a connection, a human connection within that. Now, obviously, like that wasn't the path, but the idea was I really felt that. I tried to see myself in him, so I asked him to do an assignment for me. I gave him a notebook that I had. I gave him a pen. And I asked him to meet me back at the park in 2 weeks. And as he would think of something or feel things, just sentences, nothing major. I didn't want to make it a big, like, a project. I wanted it to be easy for him. But as he felt things, or as he had a thought, just write that thought down for me. And I didn't expect it to turn into anything. And actually, when I went back in 2 weeks, I wasn't expecting to see him there. And sure enough, he was there. And he had done some of the work. He didn't do everything I asked, but he did a few things. And I said, meet me in 2 more weeks.
It's a nice starting point.
Meet me in 2 more weeks. And again, he met me. And there was one point in this, it was over the course of the summer I shot this. And there was one point he didn't show up. But then the final time, I didn't meet him again because we bumped into each other in the area. And then the final time he met, and he gave me the notebook. And in that notebook, it was simple things like, when my grandmother died, that's when everything fell apart. Or I miss my mother's home cooking. Or my father used to let me sit on his knee and drink beer. Just basic things. And what I did from there is I took pictures based on what he said. So I went and took, and again, this was like beginning of photography. So these pictures, you know, I'm happy with them. I'm not saying they're garbage. They're not. I have a book, but the idea is that it's nothing like that I think is anything photographically special. But what was special for me about that project and what that kind of lit a fire in me was to know that photography has the power to connect you with another person, and that person that I would never normally talk to is now sharing these thoughts that are deep within their subconscious or their mind or their heart, and they're putting it on paper for me, and they're doing this based on the fact that I showed interest in them, based on the fact that I sat with them for a few minutes and talked to them or spent a little, thought process behind what they were doing and saying, that I didn't just walk by them. And the camera made me stop, right? Because I was photographing people sleeping. So again, if I wasn't doing that, I would have just kept on going. So the power of the camera is the fact that I was looking for something, right? And I didn't know what. But when you open yourself up and you look, there's, Alma is the spirit sense, because to me that's what it is. There's something is revealed to you. It is open to you. Whether, you follow that or not, that's not for me to say. This is my personal, belief of it. Like I said, like I explained, I think we were at the opening together. Yeah. It's like a religion to me, photography. It does have a sense of that. And I don't mean in kind of a worship kind of way.
A cult.
I don't mean in a cult kind of way. I mean like it has.
We do give all our money to photography.
Actually, maybe there are some similarities with that, but it really just has the ability to connect you with something higher. At least for me, that's what it's been, and that's all it's been for me.
I think there's a bigger part in photography that allows us to grow as human beings, especially during this contact with other people. And I especially in my experience, after I finished my course, I did my last project on an oncology hospital, and I spent there 6 months. And although I don't like the pictures anymore, I know how much I grew during that time. Priceless. There's nothing. I'd rather have taken one picture and it still be shitty, but what I learned from those people, it is still with me today. And I think that's what's mostly important when you start doing documentary work, is that you respect the people that you're working with, and just like you were saying, go to them, just sit down with them, talk to them, understand what's behind the story, understand the story, and just try and tell it the best way you can. Because we're using a different language. If it was written, it's probably easy just to create a dialogue and write a text. With images, it's harder to create something that allows other people to connect. And when I saw your work here, I saw that feeling in the pictures. And I think it's very interesting that you were talking about not having that preparation, which is something that we usually talk amongst ourselves, which is the notion of just being open to whatever the world gives you. And I think I lost my my sense here, but it's very interesting the way that your approaches go with openness and respect with whoever you're encountering in your journey. It's more of a journey itself than the project itself, right?
And what I think that you said that's interesting, and it's funny that you said it, because it's one of the things I teach in the class that I had, is that photography is a language.
Right.
It's a language that, there's just like in other languages and verbal languages, you can speak different ones. Photography has the same ability. Like there's documentary, there's fine art, there's all kinds of ways to approach this language, this way of communicating visually with others. And it doesn't mean one is right or one is wrong, but what is it that you're trying to say?
Right.
What communication
and to whom?
Yeah, but more than to whom. Like the to whom can get really tricky.
Right.
Okay?
That's true.
Because as you get into the field further and as you grow, what happens, at least for me, and what got confusing for me, is once I started, okay, well, this is not marketable, right? Or this is something that may not be the same kind of, you might not get as many likes with this picture as you will with this picture. And as somebody that's working from intuition, that was really challenging for me, because it was like, I'm thinking about my audience before I'm taking the picture, because it can happen. And then it wasn't until I had to be like, no, forget all that. Erase that thought. And to whom is important, because obviously we're not doing it to not show anyone. We have to have an audience with in mind, but you can't lead with the audience. Right. You have to lead with your own like shots and what you want to do. And then if you do that properly, maybe you will have an audience, maybe you won't. You know, you'll fail. I've failed many times. And I think one of the things I'm really grateful for, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, but I'm grateful for the amount of times I failed, because those failures actually, it's like I was tasting port. It's like when it stays in the barrel longer. There's something that happens. Like it just, that 10-year and the 20-year and the 40-year are totally different. Yeah. And it's the same thing with your work. Like when it comes out to the world, when you open the barrel, when you let it out, that's what people are going to taste. That's what people are going to remember, you know? And so the failures that I've had allowed it to stay in the barrel a little longer. Now, did I want it to be in the barrel? No, I was trying to get it out. I was trying to push it out there and do everything I can. But at the same time, those failures kind of said, okay, it's not time yet. It's not time yet. It's not time yet. And even here, like, you know, like we talked about, the work that I have here, I love to say that it's a project in progress. I know that's counterintuitive to having a show, and I'm supposed to have the book here and everything, but the idea is this is the work that is meaningful to me right now. And the fact that it's here, I can get a gauge of how people are receiving it. If it's something that is important for other people as it is for me. And I got that. And now as I'm continuing, like I'm even more motivated to go back and to continue and to work, because it's like I did it for the right reasons, not to sell photos, not for the likes, I did it because this was the work that was meaningful to me, and this was the work that the people that I just shot recently in the past few years, that I wanted to bring them to, you know. This is a group experience. This is not about me anymore.
Yeah, we were just talking about that during coffee. The experimental side of photography before publishing a book, and the experience of creating small exhibitions or small zines, small publications, just
like some kind of a teaser. And a way to have some feedback from the people, to understand if you're going in the right way, or if you can do a little update.
Yeah, like fishing, to see if they're biting with the bait.
Yeah,
you have to change the bait.
Kind of.
The previous person that we interviewed used a very interesting analogy, which is the use of comparing photography to albums. Mm-hmm. Which is the
singles.
The book is the
book is
the album.
Is a full album, and that our idea, the zines could be the single or the EP or something.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I think
or the demo tape.
Yeah, the demo tape.
We put it on the market.
Yeah,
for the kids that know what a tape is.
And if people get interested, then here's the full work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think that, you know, again, when I decided to show this work, I really tried, because I went through this whole process over the past couple of years of really, really kind of looking in the mirror and seeing, like, why? Like, why am I doing this? I have 2 kids. I have a family. You know, I have obligations. I have responsibilities. You know, 8 years ago when I first quit the 9-to-5 grind, my son was just born. You know, people thought I was nuts. Really. But I knew that this was something I had to do. I knew that if I didn't do it, that I would regret it. That I would not feel that I did. I knew that I had some information that I needed to share. And if I didn't do it, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it.
You feel it in your guts that you really need to.
Right. But in the beginning, it was about making it. It was about getting a show. It was about having my work recognized. It was about working with Leica. It was all those things, right? That's what motivated me in the start. But as much as I love and appreciate all those things, right now for me, it's not about that really, because I had to kind of go back to the why, go back to the beginning of it all, go back to the, you know, wandering around with the camera, not knowing, you know, that this was something you can do anything with it. And when I came back to that place, it was like, okay, why are you doing this? And again, it came back to the simple fact that if I don't, I'm not happy. If I don't take photos, if I don't connect, if I don't, and I don't mean happiness in a way like, oh, I feel like great today. I mean, I just feel better as a human being when I'm doing this work, when I'm doing the work that I feel like I'm supposed to do. It's like, it's not complicated. And obviously the more that I do it, the better I feel. And the more that I get to share it and the more that I get to teach or show it, that's where it all comes together. That's where that it's kind of like your little bit of reward for the intuition that you had. It's like, because there's no promotions in this world. There's no like, your manager doesn't pull you in and say, hey, you did really good.
Congrats,
you're
congrats.
Employee of the month. It doesn't happen in this world. You don't have those things. What you do have is you have little milestones along the way that say, okay, all right.
You get there.
Keep
Congrats,
going.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going. And it's like
you're in the right path.
Yeah, exactly. So, the why, I think if I was going to give any, like I gave advice here at the workshop, the why is something that I think people should ask themselves prior to necessarily diving deep into a project or trying to like put everything into something. Figure out why you're doing it. Ask yourself honestly, like, why is this important to me? Why do I need to do this? And if you do that, I think you'll be reinforced with the feeling, or you might say, maybe that's not what I want to do. Like one of the students that I had here, a lot of the students were shooting in a documentary street style, because this was a masterclass based on that, based on like what I'm teaching. And they had more of like a editorial style where kind of like a travel and leisure magazine layout spread kind of thing, which you can say is bad. But for me, I said, this is great. Like, you just need somebody to write a story, and you basically captured Porto. So don't necessarily try to be something you're not either. Do the work that you do really well and put your name on it and push that forward. Like, I think everybody's trying to follow a little bit. Not everybody, but a lot of the motivation is, I'm going to shoot like this photographer, or I'm going to work like this photographer. And I've literally had students like after a while of teaching, I say, oh, that kind of looks familiar, and I'm not knocking it. I think it's great, but you got to get to that place, like personally, whether it's with the project or with it's something that that you connect with, but don't necessarily blindly just shoot because it's something that you see other people doing and you feel like you have to do that because other people are doing that. Because street photography, as you know, you can just shoot, like, once you take a great street photo, once you get there and you're able to hit that shutter at the right time and the light's right and the time, yeah, it's rewarding. But you can get to a place where you can do that quite frequently. Not great shots every day, but you can get to a place where it gets rewarding, but it's, okay, I can do this now. It's like, well, okay, what next?
It's also becoming natural, but
okay,
you need to
you
step up to another level. Yeah.
You can get lost in the street. I mean, it's like you can just shoot forever. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. But for me, like, it was like, okay, what am I going to do now? Now that I made this connection, now that I'm sitting with someone, do I want to just walk away and shoot the next person, or do I want to see what they're doing here and tell this story? So, everybody has their own approach. My main thing is when I talk about photography or teach anything that I have to teach is just follow the thing that you only have, that, as a photographer or as an artist, what is it that you have to say? What is it that you're doing with the camera? Is it about having a Leica? Is it about, getting you in a magazine? Is it about Instagram likes? If that's okay too. I'm not, again,
What would you say is the major problem that you find your students have during the workshops? Is it something more about the why? They just...
It's not a problem because, again, I think I'm fortunate to have the experiences that I've had. Mm-hmm. So because of the experiences I've had, I can teach in a way that I think can make it comes in a clear, for me anyways, I haven't had a bad experience, knock on wood, teaching. Because what I try to do is package it in a way where it's understandable or it's relatable. I think that if you're asking me the most difficult thing that I ask people to do or that people have a hard time doing, it's stepping out of your comfort zone. Okay. It's going up to the person. It's breaking the rule necessarily. And again, I'm not talking about posing pictures. I don't pose pictures on the street, But if you pose a picture let's say you pose a photo of a stranger.
You can feel it, right?
And no, I'm just saying but there's a tool for that too. Right. You take that picture to break the ice, to get yourself going, right? So what I recommended to all the students on Monday is let's go to the train station, let's photograph. If you walk up to a stranger and ask them to pose for a picture, let's get the engine running. Now these pictures you're going to throw away. These are not the ones that you're going to necessarily, but the next picture or the ones after your creative fluid starts going and you're actually, okay, now I feel good. Now I'm not nervous. Now I'm in the zone. Now I'm moving. Yeah. That's the picture you're going to get.
Yeah, feel confident.
Exactly. So what I teach is like, use those photos, use those junk photos or the ones, the throwaway ones, or the one that you might email a stranger.
To break the ice.
Use those as a way to get your juices flowing, But that's how you get out of the comfort zone, because it's a lot of times, even people that shoot street photography, sometimes they have a hard time getting that interaction going. It's like sneaking a picture. I'm going to sneak it here. I'm going to sneak it there. But if
like
you start,
a kind of voyeur.
Yeah, which is a whole nother style. And again, I'm not here to say one or another. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the way that I like to approach it is, again, it's like meditation. It's like I'm going to connect. I'm mindfully going to connect with someone to get my thought process flowing. So the next picture that comes, that is actually happening as it's going, that the light's hitting the person. I'm aware and I'm awake and I'm alive, and I'm not necessarily worried about someone watching me do it. Because I've already established, I've announced that I'm here. And then after that, everybody just kind of forgets you're there. So there's many approaches to it. And I think people approach it based on their personality. Some people may not have that. And for me, my personality has always been like, all right, I have the camera. I'm going to use it. Let me photograph this, that, and then see what happens. And that kind of has allowed those other projects to come, because sometimes when you do make that pose shot, in New Orleans, I had a project where I shot this gentleman that owned a tire shop, and he was there for 40 years. And that pose shot, actually, because I was just interested in the tire shop, it was basically decomposing, in front of my eyes, and it was 5:30 in the morning, and the sun wasn't out yet, and I started shooting the outside of this tire shop, and then I heard inside something moving, and then it was like, knock, knock. Hey, how are you? Can I come in? Yeah, sure. What do you want from me? But okay, come on in. And from that point, like, a little bit of a short project evolved, which, again, if I didn't take that first portrait of him or of the shop or whatever, like, I walk right past that because I'm looking for the next picture, because I'm moving on to the next photo. Yeah. And sometimes, that can be your downfall, at least for me, because I get really excited in the street. And so focusing on a subject is a way for me to, like, take that ADD and just focus it on something that I can actually, wrap my head around.
And you talk a lot with connecting with people. Can you remember what was probably the biggest moment you had with all those people, the one that keeps you in your memory, that you think it was more touching or
most memorable,
more memorable moment you connect with someone, that when you see pictures, I can remember this
with an individual? Or
with individual, yeah. With all those people you shoot till today. Can you remember, or there are several?
I remember. I was photographing in Los Angeles on Skid Row. And again, like, I started shooting homeless people in Chicago. And a lot of photographers tend to shoot homeless people in the beginning. Randy was a homeless person as well. But what I was doing with the homeless people, was trying to bring that humanity. I wasn't just taking pictures because they're easy prey, because they are easy prey sometimes for photographers. And I'm really aware of not to do that, because, again, I try to see the humanity in it. So I photographed in Chicago, and then I watched this documentary called Angels of Los Angeles, or something. I forget exact title of it. And I called the nonprofit that was in that documentary. I called them, and I asked them, do you need photography? I showed them what I did in Chicago. They flew me out there. They paid for me to come out there. I photographed their whole process. And what I liked about that nonprofit was they necessarily weren't like a religious organization. They just You didn't have to be clean to come off the street. So they were saving people's lives literally every day. But during that process, to answer your question, I was standing in front of the organization and I was photographing on the street, and this gentleman came up to me, and he was literally just arguing with someone. And you know, the streets of Skid Row in Los Angeles are a really, really difficult place because people are struggling. There's a lot of mental illness. There's a lot of substance abuse, and there's so many people there. So it's a completely different environment to photograph because there's like eyes everywhere. You know, it's like, so he came up to me and we started talking, and I remember him telling me, "You're going to get your picture. I'm going to give it to you." Right? But he first wanted to talk to me about his life and about certain things. And he had this intelligence that I found really, really surprising. Like now I'm like, okay, I'm not surprised because intelligence comes in all shapes and forms. And actually, through my photography, what I really realized, and this is my belief anyways, again, this is all subjective. This is not anybody, you know, people can argue with me, but I'm not stating fact. I'm stating opinion.
Right. It's not in stone, right?
It's not in stone. But what I learned is that the most sensitive people find themselves in difficult places. And sensitivity for me is a form of intelligence, right? So what I was surprised to find on those streets is that people have this very high intelligence level where they know exactly what I had someone come up to me and say, "Oh, you think I'm this, but I went to this school and I did this, and but my mom died and this is what happened." Like, they're aware of what you're thinking before you think it because they're human. Like, you see them as. But anyways, to get back to the point, he came up to me and he told me, "I'm going to give you your picture," and he proceeded to connect with me in this way that I never experienced before, where we were looking in each other's eyes, and when he gave me the picture. Like, he really gave me the picture. He gave me his spirit, his soul in this photo. And he looked right at me. And he, you know, there's a level of giving the photo. And so that was one of the most powerful experiences I had because it taught me that not only are the subjects aware, they're more aware than you think, but also it's a give and take relationship. When someone gives you a portrait, when someone decides to allow you to photograph them, it's a present. It's a present from them, and you're also giving them a gift by photographing them if you're doing it correctly. If you're doing it with the right intention and the right feeling, you can actually, so you should be, one of the ways that I teach students not to get uncomfortable and to feel okay is say, like, don't feel bad because you're doing a service. When you do it the right way, you're actually doing a service. You're photographing someone.
And people, they feel that.
They feel that. Right. They feel that. And they also feel when you're making fun of them.
Yeah.
And they also feel when you're looking down on them. You know, I think...
Hey, it's both ways.
It's both ways. So, you know, try not to make fun. Again, depends on your style of photography because sometimes some street photography, it has a humor sense to it. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Because there is humor in life too. Right. For me, it's about connecting. It's about the person.
It's the way you approach.
It's my way.
It's the way you approach.
It depends the way you see the world.
Exactly.
Right.
This is my language. It doesn't mean this works for me necessarily.
It's not the wrong or the right way.
Exactly.
It's your way.
It's art. Yeah. How could it be right or wrong?
Yeah.
You know, essentially, there's right ways to do it. There's right ways to approach it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to limit yourself. You have to, and that's where the why comes in again. Why are you doing it? What do you have to say? And why do you want to say that? You know, maybe you want to make people laugh. Maybe you're looking for funny scenes in the street. Then go for it. You know, if you can do that properly. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to tell a story. Then do that. But the idea is, like, you get to a place where you have to figure that out by yourself. And you can only do that by actually asking yourself those serious questions, like,
and start doing it.
Yeah, start figuring out why.
I think one of the most common things we see in kids that come to photography courses, especially the professional ones, is that they don't know the why, and that concerns us mostly when we're having these kind of discussions. Is that they just finish high school and they think, oh, I'm going to photography and this is going to be awesome, and they're going after all the romantic ideals of some work they saw somewhere. I'm going to travel. I'm going to see other places and
cool.
meet people. It's cool. I'm going to get girls, and they have this
boys,
whole idea.
boys,
and then they finish the course, and reality settles, and what do I do now? Now what?
Now what?
And that's a big problem that we're trying to get more through to them, just to explain that this is hard work. You just don't get into a photography course and everything's gonna show up one day, and let's come work for National Geographic.
Some students they think that the course will give them the answers they're looking for.
Right. Like, I'm gonna figure it out after I take this class, or well, I think I can see when you're young, how that can be, because you're excited. You're excited about what you might learn, or again, you have this idea of National Geographic or whatever, and you have all these concepts of what it's going to be like. And I think probably every photographer has a little bit of that in the beginning. At least I would say that it's natural. The difference is, once you realize that it's not like that, and the romance goes away a little bit, and you realize it's work, and you realize you got to get your hands dirty. And
it's a relationship.
It's a relationship.
Right.
Do you still want to do it? And I think, like any field, it has a way of weeding those out that don't really want to do it. And after that happens, the good thing is, when you meet a photographer that's been doing it for a while that wants to do it, or you're talking to someone else, you can at least have the respect for another, that whether you like their work or not, whether you're going to do that kind of work or not, whether it resonates with you, the basis is, somebody put a lot of energy and time into doing something that was meaningful to them. And I think, you don't get a ticket to the show without working and paying the price. It's like that simple. And we live in a world of instant everything, Instagram, Facebook, all these social media platforms, which I think are fantastic, which I think a lot of photographers use in a really clever way to promote their work and to push themselves forward. So it's not a knock. But I was just talking about this the other day, is that I remember how difficult it was for me when I first got on Facebook maybe 8 years ago or so to actually put one of my pictures up. I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to put this here? Like, this was in my drawer, in my negative, and I had this, and like, I had a special place for it.
Now the world will
and now
see
I'm just going to, what? Like, what are you talking about? It was like very difficult. But when you let it go, and again, having the right concept of the work and valuing your own work for its own reason, then I think you can be a little more free with it. And there's a learning process in letting it go too. I mean, I will say that starting shooting in 2000, I came up with film, right? So having that background, and then right after that, like, digital started taking more form. So I'm really fortunate, and I'm really grateful that I had that time frame. It was really hard at the time, because I was like, why am I all this film, all this stuff, and now like everybody's doing this? Like, it was like I felt like I missed the boat. Like, I started like at the wrong time, like this was the worst possible time to become a photographer. And I felt like that for a while. I still did it, but I still felt like, this is like, I wish I was born 40 years ago, But then what happened was, everyone became photographers, and everybody started shooting. And then this intelligence of photography was raised. So now, even though there's a lot of really, really bad stuff out there, and there's a lot of okay stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff, there's a lot of photography out there, and a lot of people know about it now. And so they can appreciate when it's
digital open gate a lot of doors for
I
many
think
people.
One of the bigger problems is, how do you know you're looking at a good picture? And this is something we also debate as well.
What makes
a good picture?
When you're editing, when you're shooting, and when you're viewing.
As a final product.
Yeah, a final product.
How do you when you look to a picture, how do you know it's a good one?
Yeah.
Do you know? No. Like, do you ever really know? I would say that, like, a good picture for me is one that I remember.
Okay.
It's like if your brain was a scanner, and you look at a photo and it's like it's an instant thing. Just like when you take it and
it's like a tattoo.
It's like
on your brain. You
like
just get stick there forever.
Yeah, like the class we had the other day. Like I remember out of the students, the one shot that stuck out the most. Like that picture is going to be in my head for a while, for probably forever, because he caught the moment, he caught the light, he caught the timing, and it was the one shot of it all. And it, for me anyways, for my experiences, for my background, for what I like. Now, so it gets subjective, and it's art. At the end of the day, this is an art form. Even though it's not treated like painting or other art forms, in Chicago, I always joke whenever I bring anyone into the Art Institute, because they have like the paintings and the masterworks on the first floor, and then the sculptures and the fine art and the modern art on the third floor, and the photography's in the basement.
Oh.
But it's like eventually it'll get up there. Eventually
that's an inverted pyramid.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. But it still is artwork, and it's subjective. So what makes it good is that feeling that it gives you. And when you look at work, when you look at someone's work, or you look at your own work, you have to be honest. You have to ask yourself, without thinking about it too much, does this make me feel something? Am I seeing something here?
Does it resonate?
Does it resonate with me? And I think what makes a successful photograph is leaving the room for it to have more space for different audiences, different people with different backgrounds to resonate. One of the things that I really struggled with in the beginning was I would tell people what to look at. I would put it in their face, especially with some of that work on the streets and the homeless. I would really want them to see like how messed up things were. So I would photograph the despair and the anguish. And what I learned really quickly is nobody wants to look at that. Like it's a good picture.
But you've tried. You made it, and you see, okay, this is not the path for me.
Yeah. Then the pictures that work are the ones that leave the room, where it might be a scene of a street scene, it might be a scene of despair, but it leaves enough room for you to bring yourself to it, where you actually want to spend time with it, where it's not throwing you, it's not like someone's forcing a meal down your throat. You're actually enjoying the food.
Do you think it's easier or harder doing that same thing with your own work, especially because you put so much on it, the emotion that you have attached to it? Mm-hmm. Sometimes probably harder just to shut it down and just look at the picture more objectively.
It's very difficult to edit your work and to look at it properly, which is why I always suggest having more eyes on it, having people that, not necessarily that you have to take everything they say, but the more eyes you can get on your work, the more portfolio things you can do, reviews, the more times you can put it up on the wall and really look at it, print out the 5x7s and look at the pictures on the wall, and have someone come look at it that you trust, and then have someone else come look at it, have someone that you maybe not like very much look at it and give you their opinion, because they'll give you, whatever. Just have as many eyes as you can look at
some
it.
feedback.
Without necessarily relying on their opinions over your own, right? At the end of the day, it's your work, right? So you have to own it. But the process of killing your babies and letting that go, letting the emotional attachments to some of it, because there's pictures that I've taken that I'm like, I remembered that whole scene and I loved it so much, and realistically it's a good picture, but when other people are engaged with it, they may not resonate with it as much, because it's more personal to me because I was there. Yeah. So I have the whole story and the narrative.
You have the full package of the image,
rather than the actual image, right? Yeah. So other people looking at your work is really important, and also, again, knowing the why. So if it fits with the why, and even if someone says that's not a great picture, right? I don't think that's going to work. I've had that happen too. I've had people say, "Don't put that there. Take that out. Pull it away." But sometimes I have to fight for it and say, I want it there. I think it belongs. It might not show, this particular style or this particular way, but it adds to what I'm trying to say, and it works with the group in a way.
It's there for a reason.
Yeah, like the picture we were talking about with the bus, with the people laughing and smiling and interacting at me photographing the bus passing. Like that was a photo that could be, necessarily is it Is it a street photo where I'm invisible? No. But am I telling them to do that? No. So for me, it showed the joy of this bus.
It's a sort of a self-portrait, right?
Yeah.
People are reacting to you.
Right. And I felt it was difficult for a long time to own that. To own that, you know, you can make people react to you. But I think that's also part of the why. Like, I enjoy that interaction. As long as I'm not directing and saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. No, if I'm if my act of simply standing here and framing is causing something to happen,
a reaction, causes a reaction,
then, you know, that's what's the difference between someone like yelling at you in the middle of the street, you know, like doing the other opposite that makes like a powerful street photograph because it has that cliche like style to it. Like, you know, I think we have to evolve as well. Like, keep pushing forward with all the photographs being made. Like, we cannot be stuck with the same standards just because like it's what people are accustomed to viewing. At that point it becomes a dead art because it's not growing anymore. It just continues to have the same, you know, narrative.
Have you had any times where you did these portfolio reviews? I know on another podcast you mentioned you did the Economopoulos Magnum.
Yeah.
And Craig Sametko as well?
No, never with Craig. He didn't. Oh. I worked with Craig as I helped him at one of his Leica Academies that he had in Chicago.
So what's the feedback like on when you're talking with someone on that level? They don't hold back when they're
you need that though. You need that
exactly,
right? Like with Nikos, like for him as a Magnum photographer, and for me that was someone that was just, you know, like again, like I left my 9 to 5 and I had responsibilities and I wasn't going to just blindly chase a dream. Like for me, it wasn't about just, you know, I asked my wife, first person I asked, she said, if you asked me that, you told me you wanted to be a singer, I would tell you, no way, you can't sing, but you can do this, right? So that was like the initial, like, all right, let me see what I can do here. And I went to New York, and I was in New York for a Magnum workshop with Jim Goldberg. And while I was in town, I reached out to the Magnum offices, and Nikos was in town, and he was gracious enough to sit with me for 15 minutes.
Nice.
And I showed him what I've been shooting. And I asked him point blank, do you think I could do this? And he literally told me, look, I see a lot of work. I see a lot of photographers. You definitely have the ability to do this. But what I don't see is the everyday shooting, being a photographer. I see that you have other things you're working here, you're doing this here. And to be a photographer, you have to be a photographer every day. When you go to bed, you're a photographer. When you wake up, you're a photographer. You can't
24/7
moonlight. And that was hard to hear because you have this narrative or you have this idea that you can do both. And I'm not saying you can't, because for a while I was doing both. But essentially, that advice kept ringing back in my head, and it kept coming back to me. And it was like I was scanned. It was like the bullshit that I was pulling, all that was gone, and I had to actually be real about it and say, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to try it. And if I fail, at least I can know that I tried and that I did everything I could do. And to get back to the original idea of intuition, emotion, the why, you know, little moments along the way of having exhibits or being able to teach a Masterclass like this with Leica and things like that. This has all been a process. It's not something that I take lightly, and it's not something that I take for granted. It's not something that I think it will always be or won't be. I take everything that comes to me and I make the most out of every opportunity, just like I do with the camera. When something is revealed, I take the most I can from it. And at the rest, I leave it to the photo gods or whoever else.
To those we praise.
To those we praise.
By the way, do you have any names you want to share of photographers that are a reference to you, that you think that we all should know their work?
Like I mentioned, I was in New York taking the Jim Goldberg Masterclass, and I think for him, like for me, the type of work that I liked, that I was that I was interested in with like that Randy project at that time. I went into the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, and I saw his work with the writing of Rich and Poor, and just some of the words that were coming out of the subjects in the hotel and the wealthy people as well, like both of them just, and then putting that next to each other. Like for me, but he broke rules. And if you know the story of Jim and what he did is that, you know, a lot of people weren't showing his work because they thought, you know, this isn't photography, you're using writing. You can't do that. Until somebody took a chance on him, and I think it was a gallery in San Francisco, and the rest is history. But the idea is that's a photographer. Obviously, you know, David Allen Harvey is a photographer that I really like. I really love his work. I really, you know, I look at his work. I look at the stuff he did when he was younger. I look at what he's doing now. He's always the same. You know, he's always shooting. It doesn't matter if he's on assignment with Magnum or he's on assignment or he's at home, you know, in his house, like with his kids or with his grandkids. I'm sorry. He's just always the same. And I think that's like the main key. Those are the two photographers that I would recommend because they have both kind of broke a mold in a way of what it is to be a photographer, a successful photographer. They've done it their own way, you know, and that's kind of what I attain to be if I'm fortunate enough to continue on this path and hopefully we'll connect again in the future. But that's the main thing, is just following that why, doing your thing and trusting the process.
And for the students, do you think that the main key is to answer the why question? Or do you have any advice for those who are listening to us?
My advice for a photography student or somebody starting within the recent past in photography is ask yourself a very simple question. Why do I want to take photographs? And if you can answer that question honestly, and you can still want to take pictures after that, then do it and don't stop until you get where you want to go with it.
The path is open.
The path is open. But don't lie to yourself, because you'll just end up wondering why you started.
I think this is as good an ending.
I think it's a great ending.
Awesome.
I think and once again, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be in this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we just have to say goodbye to our listeners in Portuguese, if you don't
good.
mind. Once again, thank you so much.
Obrigado.
Okay. Ok, malta, espero que tenham gostado desta conversa, que acho que foi muito interessante.
Sim, tem aqui muitas dicas.
Sim, ainda muito ficaria por dizer que está uma conversa aqui
sim,
para tarde.
Há muito para conversar aqui. Sim.
É verdade. E espero que tenham gostado e que sigam aqui também os conselhos, principalmente este conselho final do Nicholas para os estudantes, acho que é muito importante. E também não podemos acabar por termos que agradecer, obviamente, aqui à Leica Store do Porto.
Sim, hoje estivemos a gravar
Sim, é verdade, que é onde está em exposição,
a
exposição do Nicholas, que vai
aproveitem até dia 7.
Início de confirmação social Urban.
Até dia 7 de janeiro vai estar aqui a exposição.
Portanto, venham aqui ter. Espero que gostem da exposição. E, mais uma vez, muito obrigado por estarem desse lado. Espero que tenham gostado. E, como sempre, Ruben... Não é?
Continuem a enviar o vosso feedback, as vossas mensagens. Aproveitem e deixem os vossos reviews nas plataformas onde vocês ouvirem o podcast.
iTunes, Spotify...
Quanto mais YouTube. Vocês comentarem, mais nós vamos subindo no ranking e começamos a chegar a mais pessoas. Por isso, continuem a contribuir e a ajudar.
E obrigado por estarem desse lado.
Obrigado.
Um grande abraço. Obrigado.